Good morning and welcome to week 4. Time is zipping by as, of course, I knew it would, and I think you did too. Couple of things as we begin today. Your evaluations were in last night. I will be looking at those today and giving you a little bit of feedback. But I want to talk for a minute about why. Why are we evaluating other people's arguments? And although I know that it's fairly self-evident, it's interesting to think a little bit about what you're looking at. So as a writer, as an arguer, as someone who is commanding his or her own rhetoric, you should be looking at that in a way to say, okay, yeah, I see what Oliver's doing here. Okay, I get it. I see the humor, the satire. All right, it's funny, but it's not. Okay, so those are some biting ways of Oliver getting to his audience, and he does have a specific audience, very clear. For example, my grandmother's passed, but if she watched that, she would miss the humor entirely. Okay, so depending on your target audience, you adjust your rhetoric, your language, your tone accordingly. Your generation, by and large, responds very well to news and commentary being delivered through satirical ends. Okay, you watch Conan O'Brien, or you watch I watch John Oliver, so I guess I'm not completely exempt from that, but we watch through various outlets that provide or afford us a different way of hearing the news. Or the argument that's being presented. So you can think a little bit about that. Does that mean your argument should reflect that tone? Absolutely not. It may, but I'll tell you, it's very hard to write satirically. But more importantly, you have to find your own style for delivering your argument. So you have this issue question. All right, most of you had that research question that was put into place in your annotated bibliography. So now what you have to do is think about what's your answer to that question, okay? You saw Oliver's direction, okay, when he's looking at drones and what they do, and how it's essentially about drones, yet it's not. It's about our security. It's about our safety. It's about our influence in other nations. There are a number of things that he's commenting on through that very charged piece. Okay, so for your essay, back to this, because obviously this is where we are. This is what you're going to be doing over the next week, and doing it very closely. I mean, you have to begin drafting so that we can see a rough draft and we can process through, get some feedback. So you have this research question. Your answer to that question is your primary claim, most likely. Okay, your thesis statement, if you have one, but that's your position on the issue. That's what you go on then to provide support for. So think about a number of things. Okay, number one, how are you going to introduce this topic? You cannot assume that your reader is on the same page as you. Imagine that Joe Schmo over there has not been reading all the stuff that you have, has not been processing or thinking about the issue the way that you have. So you have to provide some background, some interesting development that grounds the argument. All right, you have to find a way to connect to your reader that also outlines or backgrounds the controversy. All right, so establish that first. Maybe you use a news story. Maybe something happened very recently that you can allude to as you open the essay. You want to hook your reader. You always want to make that introduction something that forces the reader to say, oh, wow, hey, I want to hear more about what he has to say, or I want to see how she's going to go on to defend this. So think about that as you open, and typically grounding it in something current, in something that the reader might have some sense of, would be very beneficial. Okay, so maybe that's how you begin. Maybe you open with some startling statistics, something that you found. That always works as well. But eventually you have to move into a full overview of the actual controversy. All right, you cannot assume that your reader is inside your head, which is the number one mistake that most writers make. Okay, we think the reader is there with us, and in fact, he's not. I always liken it to this. Okay, imagine that you walk into a group of friends and those friends have some other friends, and you walk in and that person says, "Oh, hey, Sally, the other day, John and I were going to a party and blah, 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 blah." You have no idea who John is, okay? So how are you possibly going to catch the comedic effect or the irony of the situation, whatever it is? You don't even know who John is. So tell your reader who John is. Give us some background. If you're going to talk about an issue, for example, somebody's looking into space exploration. Well, I need to know as a reader, what's being done now? Like, why is this an issue? Why do I care? Why should I care? So what? Answer that question. Everybody has strong topics, but you have to keep in mind that the reader is not necessarily going to know, in fact, probably won't know as much as you know. So ground that. From there, line up the types of appeals you're going to use. How are you going to persuade your reader to accept your argument? What types of evidence will you provide? What types of appeals will you make? This is where you really get to stamp the essay with your style, and I love this. I want your voice to be the prominent one, the primary one. The secondary sources, or if you did some primary research, all of that should come in as support for what you believe, for what you think. Okay, so don't get lost. Don't get so wrapped in all your research that you forget that you actually have a point of view, and that's what this essay is about. Okay. I've provided a bunch of different handouts to help you along the way. Some will apply for you and for your argument, others won't. All right, move your way through them. Similarly, you've been looking at a number of different videos and arguments and things along those lines. See what works. See what you think might apply for you. What might work for Dylan might not work at all for Jennifer. Okay, you figure out what works for you and for your argument and for your audience. We're thinking about your audience as being a pretty vast audience, so a general audience. That means you have to make those appeals accordingly. All right, you can't make any assumptions that your reader is going to know. You can't step on toes. Okay, when it comes to dealing with the counter argument or counter arguments, that's up to you. All right, you'll read many arguments where the counter argument isn't addressed at all. Depending on your argument, you may not need to do that. Okay, a couple of you are looking at parenting styles and things like that. It doesn't mean that you're saying, hey, this is the way to do it, and somebody else is on the other side going, no, 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 you have to talk about this, because maybe you don't have to. Okay, maybe you build your own argument so strongly that it defeats any opposition that might be coming your way. So that's a design strategy in terms of the writing that you can use and that you can employ. Okay, logistically, providing outside research. I've posted a number of links for integrating outside sources, not just for how to cite them. I get it. Like, everybody panics over the in-text citations, the parentheticals, and those are very important. But more importantly is how you move someone else's voice into your own essay, okay, without it seeming so completely out of left field. So you have to find a way to smoothly integrate outside information. And I know that most of you probably heard all about this in Comp 1 or in other classes, but I want to just do a quick refresher, all right? When you pull outside information, a couple of things that you have to consider. Are you going to provide a direct quotation? In other words, there's no better way for you to say what that writer has said. Okay, are you going to paraphrase it? Are you just going to summarize? Are you going to capture the essence of it? That's entirely up to you, and it's very dependent on where it appears in your paper, on how you've structured your paper, on how it's going to support your argument. Regardless, any one of those ways, whether you paraphrase, summarize, or quote directly, you must provide attribution, which means you have to use an in-text citation, all right, a parenthetical, that indicates that information, that those ideas are not yours. All right, otherwise it's plagiarism. So you have to be mindful of that. MLA makes it so easy. All you have to do is provide an in-text citation, and then that in-text citation directly links to that source on your works cited page. They've made it as simple as humanly possible. All right, and there are a bunch of tutorials on how to do that. The OWL at Purdue is probably the most I guess, the simplest in terms of navigating the how to and what to do sorts of things. So look at that. But anyway, the most, I guess, maybe challenging part is how to move in Dr. Jones's information in a way that it stays consistent with your voice. So there are a few things you need to do. Number one, if you're going to tell me that Dr. Jones provides statistics about texting and driving, blah, 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 who's Dr. Jones? Like, does Dr. Jones have, is Dr. Jones a podiatrist? Because that doesn't make him an authority on texting and driving. Is Dr. Jones a researcher out of Northwest? Okay, hey, maybe now we're getting somewhere. Someone who looks at traffic fatalities or traffic accidents, or is he an insurance agent? Things like that. Make sure that your experts are, in fact, relevant experts. Okay, just because someone has a title doesn't make him or her an expert in your field. So you credential that writer. All right, so you say, Dr. Jones, researcher at Rand Institute for XYZ, provides data to support yada, yada, yada. Okay, so then you finish that. But you credential that author, and then you move into the information that he or she is providing. Sometimes you can get away with just providing your parenthetical. So maybe you have statistics from a particular website. You can just use that in the parenthetical, and the reader's going to know that you've vetted your sources, that you have credible information, because you will have established authority as a writer on the topic. All right, so think about how you're going to make that work. Preview kind of your ideas. Don't just randomly drop quotations into your paper, and follow through. If something's significant, show us why or remind us why. A lot of people will say, oh my gosh, how am I going to write 6 pages on whatever the topic is? You really shouldn't have any problem making page limits. It should be something that happens very naturally during the course of your development of the ideas. If you're not making that, you're probably not providing enough support. I'm not a huge page counter. Some of you will write 5.5 pages, 5 pages, and it'll be fabulous. Others of you will write 10, okay? It's very dependent on all those other variables, okay? So don't get hung up on the word count, and don't go making, 16-point font, because I read, I can see, believe me, because I have to expand everything so I can see it. So if I don't, then I know your font is way too big. Okay, so think about that as you're moving those outside sources in. Think about the appeals that you're going to use. Think about how you're going to organize this argument. I've given you a PAPL organizational sheet. You don't have to follow it. I don't think there's any real tried and true structure for designing an argument, but some people need that, and that might be a good organizational tool for you to use if you find yourself scrambling a little bit. Take a look at what you have. Sit down with your research. Okay, what am I pulling from this source? What am I pulling from that source? How does that support my ideas? And use that to guide you. Remember, your audience needs to care about what you're talking about. I don't want you to become overly dependent on emotional appeals, but at the same time, I want you to build that bridge between your reader, the issue, and you. Okay, so kind of keep all of these pieces in mind as you're sculpting your arguments. Read outside arguments. I'm going to provide some more information from the text for how to think critically about your topic, how to move through it in a way that gives the reader something new. Don't give us that same old tried and true argument. Give us something new. Give us a new way to think about something, and think about your reader as you do that. Okay, I know I've been talking for a long time. I'm really sorry, but I felt like I had a lot to say today, and I probably will every day this week as you continue drafting. Get writing. Do not wait on this, okay? Get to work. Have a great Monday.